Behind the wholesome family sitcom facade of Diff'rent Strokes lay a series of bizarre casting decisions, production mishaps, and strange connections that most viewers never suspected. From a show originally titled after an incorrect distance measurement to child stars mistaken for little people, the beloved NBC series harbored secrets as surprising as Arnold's famous catchphrase. The show's journey from a detective concept to family comedy involved everything from Ku Klux Klan hate mail to episodes airing completely out of order. Here are the 15 weird facts you didn't know about Diff'rent Strokes 1978. Fact 1. The original title was geographically wrong. When television producers Norman Lear and his team first began developing what would eventually become Diff'rent Strokes in 1978, they had a completely different title in mind that revealed a surprising lack of knowledge about New York City geography. The show's original working title was 45 Minutes from Harlem, which the creators thought perfectly captured the distance between the wealthy Upper East Side where the Drummond family lived and the Harlem neighborhood where Arnold and Willis Jackson originally came from. However, there was one major problem with this title that apparently nobody on the production team bothered to verify during the early development stages. Harlem is actually only 10 to 15 minutes away from the Upper East Side by subway or taxi, making the proposed title completely inaccurate and potentially embarrassing for a show that was supposed to be set in Manhattan. The significant distance suggested by 45 minutes would have been more appropriate for a commute from the suburbs or even another borough entirely, not for two neighborhoods that are relatively close together within the same borough of Manhattan. This geographical error reveals how little the Hollywood production team initially understood about the actual layout of New York City, despite creating a show that was specifically about the cultural and economic differences between these two Manhattan neighborhoods. The mistake becomes even more glaring when you consider that the entire premise of the show relied on the contrast between the wealthy Park Avenue lifestyle and the working-class Harlem background, yet the creators didn't seem to know how close these areas actually were to each other. Eventually, the production team abandoned the geographically challenged title altogether and settled on Diff'rent Strokes, which was inspired by the popular phrase "different strokes for different folks" that had been popularized by boxer Muhammad Ali in 1966. This final title choice proved to be much more appropriate and memorable, avoiding the embarrassing geographical mistake that would have made the show a target for ridicule from actual New York residents who knew the real distance between these neighborhoods. Fact 2. Gary Coleman was mistaken for a little person. Gary Coleman's remarkable acting ability and professional demeanor were so impressive that television executives initially couldn't believe he was actually a 10-year-old child, leading to one of the most unusual casting confusions in television history. When Coleman first began appearing in commercials and making guest appearances on shows like The Jeffersons in the mid-1970s, his combination of sophisticated delivery, perfect comedic timing, and unusually small stature for his age created such a convincing performance that industry professionals genuinely believed he was a little person who was simply pretending to be a child actor. This misconception wasn't just a fleeting thought among a few casting directors, but a widespread belief that persisted long enough to become part of Hollywood gossip and industry discussions about the young performer. Coleman's natural talent for quick wit and fast one-liners, combined with his ability to deliver adult-level humor with complete confidence, made him seem far more mature than any typical child actor of that era. The fact that he could hold his own in scenes with experienced adult actors while maintaining perfect professionalism only added to the confusion about his true age and status. The misunderstanding about Coleman's identity was further complicated by his medical condition, which had stunted his growth due to kidney problems that required multiple transplants throughout his childhood. His condition, caused by a genetic birth defect where he was born with one atrophied kidney and the other already failing, meant that the medications he took to manage his health had suppressed his normal growth phase. By the time he was 14 years old, Coleman knew he wouldn't grow beyond 4 feet 8 inches tall, which made his small stature seem consistent with what casting directors expected from a little person rather than a growing child. The confusion only cleared up when industry professionals began working more closely with Coleman and realized that despite his incredible poise and professional attitude, he was indeed a genuine child actor who simply happened to possess extraordinary natural talent combined with a medical condition that affected his physical development. Fact 3. The show started as a detective series. Before Diff'rent Strokes became the beloved family sitcom that audiences remember, the show went through a completely different concept that would have transformed it into a crime-solving detective series with Conrad Bain and Gary Coleman as an unlikely investigative duo. During the early development stages in 1978, producers Norman Lear and his team explored numerous setting and format options, including one particularly unusual idea, where Bain would play a private detective or gumshoe, with young Coleman serving as his street-smart associate and informant who could help solve cases. This detective concept drew direct inspiration from the fictional character Bulldog Drummond, a popular British detective from novels and films who was known for his unconventional methods and adventurous approach to solving crimes. The producers apparently felt that Bain's authoritative presence combined with Coleman's quick wit and small stature could create an interesting dynamic for a detective show, where the adult investigator would rely on his young partner's ability to gather information in places and situations where a full-grown adult might not be able to operate effectively. The idea of pairing an experienced adult detective with a clever child informant wasn't entirely without precedent in television and film, but it would have represented a dramatic departure from the family-friendly content that eventually made Diff'rent Strokes so successful. Conrad Bain himself had considerable input into the various directions and options that producers were considering, which suggests that the detective concept was seriously discussed rather than just being a passing thought during brainstorming sessions. Although the detective series concept was ultimately abandoned in favor of the family sitcom format that audiences came to love, one lasting element from this early development phase remained in the final version of the show. The producers decided to keep the surname Drummond for Bain's character as a subtle nod to the Bulldog Drummond detective stories that had originally inspired their crime-solving concept, creating an unexpected connection between the family comedy and the detective fiction that had influenced its earliest incarnation. Fact 4. Conrad Bain received KKK hate mail. Despite Diff'rent Strokes being a lighthearted family sitcom, the show's premise of a wealthy white businessman adopting 2 African-American children from Harlem sparked disturbing reactions from racist viewers that escalated into genuine threats against the cast members. Conrad Bain, who played the kind-hearted father figure Philip Drummond, began receiving threatening letters from members of the Ku Klux Klan shortly after the show premiered in November of 1978, revealing how controversial the adoption storyline was for some viewers who were uncomfortable with the idea of interracial families being portrayed positively on television. The hate mail that Bain received wasn't just casual angry letters from disgruntled viewers, but official correspondence that bore the disturbing hallmarks of organized hate group activity. These threatening letters were sealed in wax by a Grand Dragon, which is a high-ranking leadership position within the Ku Klux Klan hierarchy, indicating that the harassment was coming from organized leadership rather than just individual members acting on their own. The wax sealing was a traditional method used by the organization to authenticate official communications and demonstrate that the threats carried the weight of the group's authority behind them. The harassment extended beyond Conrad Bain to include other cast members as well, with Todd Bridges later revealing that he also faced intimidation from people who identified themselves as Klan members during the show's run. This targeting of both the white and black actors involved in the series demonstrated how the simple concept of an interracial family living together harmoniously was seen as threatening enough to warrant organized opposition from hate groups who viewed the show's positive portrayal of racial integration as dangerous to their ideology. The fact that a family-friendly sitcom designed to promote understanding and acceptance could generate such intense hatred from organized racist groups highlights the social tensions that still existed in America during the late 1970s, even as mainstream television was beginning to feature more diverse storylines and characters that reflected the changing demographics and values of American society. Fact 5. Dana Plato was discovered on The Gong Show. Dana Plato's path to becoming Kimberly Drummond on Diff'rent Strokes began in one of the most unexpected places in television history, when she was spotted by a producer while participating in a cheerleading team audition on The Gong Show, the notorious amateur talent competition that was famous for its bizarre acts and unpredictable outcomes. Producer Al Burton happened to be watching the show when Plato appeared as part of a cheerleading squad that was performing their routine in front of the show's panel of celebrity judges, and something about her presence immediately caught his attention, even though she wasn't performing as an individual act. The Gong Show, hosted by Chuck Barris, was known for featuring amateur performers who often had more enthusiasm than actual talent, and many acts were quickly eliminated when judges hit the large gong that gave the show its name. However, Burton wasn't looking for traditional entertainment talent when he spotted Plato during the cheerleading performance, but rather someone who possessed that indefinable quality of screen presence that could translate well to television acting, which he later described as seeing that she had a particular spark about her that made her stand out from the other performers. What makes this discovery story even more remarkable is that Burton wasn't actively scouting for talent while watching The Gong Show, but was simply viewing it as regular entertainment when Plato's natural charisma jumped out at him through the television screen. This chance encounter demonstrates how unpredictable the casting process can be in Hollywood, where future television stars can be discovered in the most unlikely circumstances, rather than through traditional audition processes or talent agency submissions. Burton's instinct about Plato's potential proved to be accurate, as he recommended her directly for the role of Philip Drummond's daughter Kimberly, without requiring her to go through the typical lengthy audition process that most actors face when competing for major television roles. This unconventional path from game show cheerleading performance to sitcom stardom represents one of the most unusual casting origin stories in television history, showing how a single moment of being in the right place at the right time can completely change someone's career trajectory. Fact 6. The famous catchphrase was never scripted. One of the most iconic catchphrases in television history came about entirely by accident, when Gary Coleman transformed a standard piece of dialogue into something that would become synonymous with 1980s pop culture, even though the writers never intended to create a memorable catchphrase at all. According to series writer Ben Starr, the original script for Arnold Jackson simply called for him to say, "What are you talking about, Willis?" in a completely straightforward manner, using proper grammar and pronunciation that would have sounded like any other line of dialogue in the show. However, when Coleman read the line during filming, his natural speech patterns and unique delivery style caused him to compress and modify the phrase into, "What you talking about, Willis?" which immediately sounded more authentic and entertaining than the formal version that had been written on the page. The way Coleman naturally spoke the line reflected his character's personality and background much more effectively than the scripted version, giving Arnold a distinctive voice that felt genuine rather than artificially constructed by television writers. The positive reaction from the cast, crew, and eventually the audience to Coleman's improvised delivery was so strong that the writers decided to keep the modified version and began incorporating it into future episodes as a recurring element of Arnold's character. What started as a single instance of an actor naturally interpreting dialogue in his own style quickly evolved into one of the most recognizable catchphrases of the entire decade, appearing on everything from merchandise to other television shows that referenced the line. The writers were careful to use the catchphrase strategically rather than overusing it, attempting to portion it out across episodes so that it wouldn't lose its impact or become annoying to viewers. Despite their efforts to control its frequency, the phrase became so popular that it transcended the show itself and entered the broader cultural vocabulary. By the late 1990s, Coleman had grown so tired of being associated with the line that he generally refused to say it in public appearances, demonstrating how a single moment of natural acting can create a legacy that follows a performer for their entire career. Fact 7. Season 6. Episodes aired completely out of order. The sixth season of Diff'rent Strokes became a confusing nightmare for viewers when the network made the bizarre decision to air episodes completely out of their intended production order, creating massive continuity errors that left audiences scratching their heads about what was actually happening in the Drummond household. This wasn't just a case of one or two episodes being switched around, but rather a systematic problem that affected the entire season and made it nearly impossible for viewers to follow the ongoing storylines that the writers had carefully constructed to build upon each other in a logical sequence. The most glaring example of this scheduling disaster involved the major storyline where Mr. Drummond gets married to Maggie McKinney, played by Dixie Carter, which was supposed to be one of the season's biggest developments. However, because episodes were aired out of order, viewers would see episodes where Mr. Drummond and Maggie were already married and living together with her son Sam, followed by episodes where there was no mention of Maggie or Sam at all. And then suddenly they would see the actual wedding episodes that were supposed to explain how this new family arrangement came about. In one particularly confusing episode called The House Guest, Arnold makes a joke about the bathroom, saying that Kimberly won't be the only girl in the house anymore when a female friend comes to stay, completely ignoring the fact that Maggie should already be living there as his new stepmother. Meanwhile, Willis and Arnold are shown sharing a room again, even though previous episodes had established that the living arrangements had changed to accommodate the expanded family with Sam's arrival. The production codes reveal the extent of the problem, with The House Guest having production code 612, meaning it was actually the 12th episode produced, while it aired much later in the season after the wedding episodes with production codes 620 and 621 had already been broadcast. This meant that viewers saw the aftermath of events before they saw the events themselves, creating a completely backwards narrative that made the season feel disjointed and poorly planned, even though the episodes had been carefully written in the correct order. Fact 8. Alan Thicke co-wrote and performed the theme song. Long before Alan Thicke became known to television audiences as the wise and caring father Jason Seaver on Growing Pains, and decades before his son Robin Thicke became a famous pop singer, Alan Thicke was already making his mark in the entertainment industry as a talented composer and songwriter who created some of the most memorable television theme songs of the 1980s. One of his most recognizable contributions to television music was his work on the Diff'rent Strokes theme song, which he not only co-wrote but also performed himself, lending his distinctive voice to the opening credits that millions of viewers heard every week. Thicke collaborated with co-writers Al Burton and Gloria Loring to create both the music and lyrics for the theme song, crafting words that perfectly captured the show's central message about how different people from different backgrounds can come together to form a loving family. The song's lyrics emphasize the idea that there are many different ways to live and be happy, reflecting the show's core theme about the cultural differences between the wealthy Drummond family and the Jackson brothers from Harlem, and how those differences could actually strengthen their bond rather than divide them. What makes Thicke's involvement even more interesting is that he was actively building a career as a television theme song specialist during this period, using his musical talents to create memorable opening sequences for multiple shows that would become classics of the era. In addition to his work on Diff'rent Strokes, Thicke also wrote the theme song for The Facts of Life, which was the successful spin-off series that featured Charlotte Rae's character, Mrs. Garrett, in her new role as a house mother at a girls' boarding school. Thicke's musical contributions to these shows helped establish him as one of the go-to composers for television theme songs during the late 1970s and early 1980s, building a reputation that would later serve him well when he transitioned to acting and became a television star in his own right. His ability to create catchy, memorable melodies that perfectly matched the tone and themes of different shows demonstrated his versatility as a composer and his understanding of how music could enhance the television viewing experience. Fact 9. Janet Jackson had a secret marriage during filming. Janet Jackson's recurring role as Willis's girlfriend Charlene on Diff'rent Strokes from 1980 to 1984 was complicated by a secret personal drama that was unfolding behind the scenes, as the young actress was secretly married to R&B singer James DeBarge during much of her time on the show. This hidden marriage created significant emotional stress for Jackson, who was trying to balance her emerging career as both an actress and a recording artist, while dealing with the pressures of a relationship that she had to keep completely private from the public and even from many of her professional colleagues. The secrecy surrounding Jackson's marriage to DeBarge wasn't just a matter of personal privacy, but was likely influenced by the strict control that her father and manager Joseph Jackson maintained over her career and public image during this period. Janet was still a teenager when she married DeBarge, and the Jackson family was known for carefully managing how their children were presented to the public, particularly when it came to romantic relationships that might affect their marketability as entertainers. The emotional strain of maintaining this secret while performing on a popular television show became so significant that Jackson later revealed in interviews that the stress of her hidden marriage contributed to her feelings of indifference towards some of her other acting work during this period, including her role on the musical drama series Fame. The pressure of keeping such an important part of her personal life hidden from the public while trying to maintain her professional responsibilities created a difficult situation that affected her ability to fully enjoy or engage with acting projects. Jackson's experience on Diff'rent Strokes wasn't entirely negative despite the personal stress she was experiencing, as she later spoke fondly of the cast members and mentioned that they would occasionally play pranks on her during filming. However, the hidden marriage situation demonstrates how young performers in the entertainment industry often face complex personal challenges that the audience never sees, while they're expected to maintain their professional demeanor and deliver consistent performances regardless of what might be happening in their private lives. Fact 10. Todd Bridges called his real mother son. One of the most amusing behind-the-scenes moments from Diff'rent Strokes occurred during the filming of a courtroom scene when Todd Bridges, who played Willis Jackson, made a hilarious mistake that perfectly demonstrated how actors can sometimes get confused between their real lives and their fictional characters. The scene involved Arnold being in court, with a judge asking the Drummond family members to explain their relationship to the young boy, which should have been a straightforward sequence where each character would simply state their connection to Arnold in a few brief words. When Conrad Bain, who played Philip Drummond, delivered his line, "I'm his father," as scripted, Todd Bridges was supposed to follow immediately with, "I'm his brother," to establish Willis's relationship to Arnold. However, in what became one of the show's most memorable bloopers, Bridges accidentally blurted out, "I'm his son," instead of the correct line. creating a moment of confusion that completely changed the family dynamics being established in the scene and left everyone on set laughing at the unexpected mistake. This blooper was significant enough that it was later featured on a television blooper program, where viewers got to see the outtake and understand exactly what had gone wrong during the filming process. The mistake reveals how easy it can be for actors to get their lines mixed up, especially in scenes where multiple characters are stating similar types of relationship information in quick succession, and how the pressure of performing can sometimes cause even experienced actors to say the opposite of what they intended. What makes this particular blooper even more entertaining is that it shows how Bridges momentarily forgot that his character Willis was supposed to be Arnold's older brother, rather than another adopted son in the Drummond household. The fact that this mistake was preserved and later shared with audiences demonstrates how even professional television productions have moments of unexpected humor that occur naturally during the filming process, and how these unscripted moments can sometimes be more memorable than the actual dialogue that was written for the scene. Fact 11. Gary Coleman started at $1,800 per episode. Despite being the undeniable star and main drawing power of Diff'rent Strokes, Gary Coleman received what can only be described as shockingly low compensation when the show first debuted, earning just $1,800 per episode during the first season. Even though his character Arnold was clearly the central focus of the series, and his performance was driving the show's popularity with audiences, this surprisingly modest salary was especially remarkable considering that Coleman's natural charisma, perfect comedic timing, and memorable catchphrase were the primary reasons viewers tuned in each week, making him essentially irreplaceable to the show's success. The low initial payment becomes even more striking when you consider that television actors typically earn significantly more when they are the featured star of a successful primetime series, and Coleman's situation was made more complicated by the fact that his parents also served as his managers and were responsible for negotiating his contracts with the network and production company. This dual role meant that his parents had to balance their parental responsibilities with their business obligations to secure fair compensation for their son's work, while also ensuring that his career decisions were in his best long-term interests. Fortunately, Coleman's parents recognized that their son was being significantly underpaid for his contributions to the show's success, and successfully argued for a substantial raise that brought his salary up to $30,000 per episode for the second season. This dramatic increase from $1,800 to $30,000 represented more than a 16-fold improvement in his compensation, reflecting a more accurate assessment of his value to the production and his importance to the show's continued success. However, the financial negotiations didn't end there, as Coleman's parents continued to push for even better compensation as the show's popularity grew, and their son's star power became increasingly evident to network executives. In 1981, during contract talks for another raise, Coleman actually sat out several episodes at the beginning of the fourth season, while the negotiations were still ongoing, demonstrating how seriously his family took the matter of ensuring he received fair payment for his work. Fact 12. The show had 3 failed Hello, Larry crossovers. NBC made the unusual decision to create 3 separate hour-long crossover episodes between Diff'rent Strokes and another sitcom called Hello, Larry during the first and second seasons, in what was essentially a desperate attempt by the network to use the popularity of the successful Drummond family to save a struggling show that was failing to find its audience. Hello, Larry starred McLean Stevenson, who had previously been known for his role as Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake on the hit series Mass, H, but his new show about a radio talk show host raising 2 daughters was not connecting with viewers and was consistently receiving poor ratings. The crossover concept was built around the storyline that Philip Drummond and Larry Alder were old Army buddies who had maintained their friendship over the years, which provided a logical reason for the two families to interact and spend time together in extended episodes that would showcase both sets of characters. NBC had strategically scheduled Hello Larry to air in the time slot immediately following Diff'rent Strokes, hoping that viewers who enjoyed watching the Drummond family would stick around to see more of Larry Alder and his daughters, essentially using the successful show as a lead-in to boost the ratings of the struggling series. The crossover episodes were edited into two-part format for syndication and overseas broadcasts, but their original presentation as hour-long specials was designed to give Hello Larry maximum exposure to the Diff'rent Strokes audience, while also providing NBC with special event programming that could potentially attract additional viewers who might be curious about seeing their favorite characters in extended storylines. The network put considerable effort into promoting these crossover events as special television experiences that would give fans of both shows something unique to enjoy. Unfortunately, despite NBC's strategic scheduling and the promotional efforts surrounding these crossover episodes, the plan to save Hello Larry through association with Diff'rent Strokes proved to be completely unsuccessful. The struggling show was unable to build a sustainable audience even with the benefit of being connected to one of NBC's most popular sitcoms, and Hello Larry was ultimately canceled after the end of its second season, making the crossover episodes a failed experiment in using one show's success to rescue another. Fact 13. Dana Plato was a professional figure skater. Before Dana Plato became known to television audiences as Kimberly Drummond, she had already developed impressive skills as a trained figure skater, demonstrating a level of athletic ability that most viewers never suspected existed behind her acting performances on Diff'rent Strokes. This hidden talent represented years of dedicated training and practice that Plato had pursued alongside her early acting career, showing that she was much more than just a typical child actor who had stumbled into television work without any other significant abilities or interests. The producers of Diff'rent Strokes discovered Plato's figure skating background during the casting process or early production meetings, and rather than simply ignoring this aspect of her personal skills, they made the creative decision to incorporate her skating abilities directly into the show's storylines. This led to the creation of a special episode titled Family on Ice, which was specifically designed to showcase Plato's figure skating talents in a way that would feel natural and entertaining within the context of the show's family-friendly format. The episode became even more special when the producers arranged for Dorothy Hamill, the famous Olympic figure skating champion who had won the gold medal at the 1976 Winter Olympics in Innsbruck, Austria, to appear as a guest star alongside Plato. Hamill's participation in the episode elevated it from simply being a showcase for one cast member's hidden talent to becoming a legitimate figure skating event that featured both a trained actress and one of the most celebrated Olympic athletes in the sport's history. The collaboration between Plato and Hamill in Family on Ice provided viewers with a unique opportunity to see a different side of the actress who usually appeared in more traditional family sitcom scenarios, while also giving the show a chance to create memorable television that combined entertainment with genuine athletic skill. This episode demonstrated how television producers in the late 1970s and early 1980s were willing to explore the diverse talents of their cast members and find creative ways to incorporate those abilities into their programming, creating content that was both entertaining and showcased real skills that might otherwise have remained hidden from the viewing public. Fact 14. Muhammad Ali inspired the show's title. The final title that producers chose for Diff'rent Strokes has a surprising connection to one of the most famous athletes in American history, as it was directly inspired by a phrase that heavyweight boxing champion Muhammad Ali popularized during a 1966 interview with the Great Bend Daily Tribune. According to the Yale Book of Quotations, Ali was quoted in that interview as saying, "different strokes for different folks," using the phrase to express his philosophy about how different people have different approaches to life, and that these differences should be accepted and respected rather than criticized or discouraged. Ali's use of this phrase helped bring it into mainstream American culture, where it resonated with people who appreciated the idea that diversity in thinking and lifestyle choices was something to be celebrated rather than feared. The phrase gained even more popularity when musician Syl Johnson incorporated it into a 1968 song, further cementing its place in the cultural vocabulary of the era and making it familiar to audiences who would later encounter it as the inspiration for a television show title. When the producers of Diff'rent Strokes were searching for the right title to capture the essence of their show about a wealthy white businessman adopting two African-American children from Harlem, Ali's popularized phrase provided the perfect framework for expressing the show's central theme. The concept of different strokes for different folks perfectly matched the series' message about how people from completely different backgrounds and economic circumstances could come together to form a loving family unit, despite their obvious differences in race, class, and life experience. The connection between Ali and the show became even more meaningful when the boxing legend agreed to make a cameo appearance during the second season in 1979, bringing the person who had originally popularized the phrase directly into the world of the television series that had taken its name from his words. This guest appearance created a full-circle moment where the cultural icon who had inspired the show's title became part of the show itself, demonstrating how his philosophy about accepting differences had influenced not just the series' name, but also its ongoing commitment to promoting understanding between people from diverse backgrounds. Fact 15. The final episode had no goodbye. The series finale of Diff'rent Strokes, which aired on March 7, 1986, was titled The Front Page and featured Arnold Jackson working on an investigative report for his school newspaper about student athletes using anabolic steroids, making it a completely typical episode that gave no indication whatsoever that viewers were witnessing the end of an 8-year television journey. The episode was filmed and produced as a standard installment of the series, with the writers, cast, and crew having no advance knowledge that it would serve as the final chapter in the Drummond family's story, because the show's cancellation was announced so abruptly that there was no time to create a proper farewell episode. This sudden ending was particularly disappointing because it meant that several key cast members were completely absent from what turned out to be the series finale, including Todd Bridges, who played Willis, Dana Plato, who played Kimberly, and Mary Jo Catlett, who played the housekeeper Pearl. The absence of these important characters from the final episode created an unsatisfying conclusion to the series, as viewers never got to see a proper goodbye scene that would have acknowledged the relationships and storylines that had developed over nearly a decade of television programming. The cast members themselves later expressed their disappointment about not realizing that the front page would be their final opportunity to appear together on screen as the Drummond family, with several actors stating that they would have liked to have been present for the last episode so they could properly mark the end of the series and say farewell to the characters they had portrayed for so many years. This missed opportunity for closure was especially significant, given how much the show had meant to both the performers and the audiences who had followed their adventures through 8 seasons. The abrupt nature of the cancellation meant that many storylines and character relationships were left unresolved, and the show simply ended without any of the emotional weight or sense of completion that viewers typically expect from a series finale. Instead of a memorable goodbye that celebrated the show's impact and legacy, Diff'rent Strokes simply disappeared from television schedules, leaving fans with an ordinary episode about steroids in high school sports as their final memory of the beloved sitcom.